How's it going? Welcome to this new class. This time, we're going to continue with the labs. Specifically, we're going to deploy 3 instances of Omniliads. And each instance is going to use an external bucket. We are going to use an external bucket to the recordings, as we know, unstructured data, and later on, the backups. This is important, let's say, to specify and to have this scenario clear, because then we're going to move forward with the backup and restore part. And let's see how important it is when conceiving backup, restore, rollbacks, and cloud migrate, or migration from cloud to cloud, how important it is to support everything that is unstructured data and backups inside an external bucket to the Linux instance that is going to run the rest of Omniliad. So, on the one hand, the scenario would be 2 instances already on a cloud provider. We are going to choose a cloud provider to work for the fact of show you how to centralize or to generalize some variables. For example, the part of buckets. So we're going to use here in DigitalOcean 2 instances. 2 of the 3 instances are going to be in DigitalOcean. And each of these instances, if you notice, already has its bucket created. I already create a bucket in DigitalOcean to associate it to each of the instances. That would represent subscribers, for example, in a cloud contact center as a service. On the other hand, I have the instance that we were seeing in the previous classes. That is an instance with Debian Linux 11 that is on-premise in a Proxmox server that I have of laboratory, and also to be able to carry out the course, the laboratory. This instance that I tell you, we are going to use it with an external bucket. Yes? But this external bucket is also on-premise, let's say, what I have here, on another IP address, as you will see, a Minio server. This is really simple. To get up, I have an external Minio server where, I'm going to manage. I already have my bucket here as well, which is what I'm going to use it for, to associate it here to the lab. I have here a bucket, and I already have here the access key pair to associate it to the instance. So on the one hand, I'm going to have the instance. I'm going to order them like this. Here in my YML, which is the one I've been using, what I'm going to do is then work with 3 instances of type IO or link 1. If I continue in this section, that is within the first section of the file where the hosts and the deployment types are declared, I continue working here in the first part, that is enumeration of the hosts of the Omniliad instances that are going to be all in one. On the one hand, then I have these 2 instances that are the ones that I have in the cloud. Let's see then that here I have an instance that has a public IP1 private as it should be. This is called Espinillo. Then it is this. I copy me the address, remote, and the LAN address that will take that Usen took the host. On the other hand, I go now with this other one that also is an Ubuntu 23 and has a IP public to access Ansible and make its deploy. And on the other hand, the private IP, finally, let's go to the third of the tenants, the third of the OmniLead instances. That, as we saw in the previous lab, it is an instance to which one I am reaching by VPN. So that's why the LAN in the part of Ansible host and is precisely the same IP address that will take at LAN level. That is to connect by Ansible, we'll use the 44, and it's also the IP itself. The only IP that has the instance. So here I clarify that it is a LAN type infrastructure, because in the general variables, as we know, the second section of the default file comes set this infra environment in cloud. Here, as it tells us, it gives us all the possibilities. This comes this way in cloud. So, when I want to, declare that it is worth something else for a particular host? Well, I have to explicitly declare it here. Then notice that unlike these two instances, in these instances, I simply put the name of the bucket, but I do not put the access key, the secret key, or the URL. Unlike that, here in this instance, that is the one I am hosting on premise, if I do. Because, well, this is so that we also begin to work and understand more practically the issues of the variables. Notice that these two instances. Here, the only thing it says is the name of the bucket and nothing else. Why? Well, because here I worked on the part of global variables. And for example, I declared I uncommented here. This is commented by default. But I uncommented and put the URL where I am hosting, where I am better said, where they are serving me the object storage service. Where is the object storage service of DigitalOcean? I declare it here. So this parameter is affecting all the hosts that I declare, both IO and the rest, as long as, well, of course I don't declare otherwise. For example, this host and this host are going to be using endpoint to locate the storage technology, that bucket URL parameter that I have down there, declared. But this, which is the on-premise, is using one of its own. Another one, notice, is a private address where I have the Minio host, the instance of Minion object storage on LAN. Notice that, for example, the access key, the secret key that I am putting for the tenant, that I deploy on premise, affect to that host to that instance. While those two, I don't put anything regarding access and secret key. Why? And because I'm using the general one, and do you remember yesterday? Do you remember from the previous class that I had registered a user one key in DigitalOcean object storage? Well, now I put them directly here in the part of general variables. Then these two variables, the secret and the access key, together with the URL, bucket URL, are going to color all the instances unless otherwise indicated, as in this case, that is to say they too directly, nor I put them. And if I had a third, a fourth 1.5 subscriber who already directly mount it in the DigitalOcean cloud, and directly I would not have to, so I'm copying this again, right? If I have a third, a fourth 1.5 subscriber in DigitalOcean, the only thing I'm going to do is to start to duplicate these blocks or only change the tenant ID, the bucket name, and the access IP and LAN IP, because it is just a new instance. But to save me, let's say, having to declare in each host the variables, for example, of access to the bucket and the endpoint that can be shared among several tenants in the same cloud. So that's why here only has these declared variables and doesn't have to declare. And in this other, better said, in this other scenario, I declare the infra end, the secret, and the access key to connect to this particular endpoint. And notice this last parameter is a parameter, well, many times in these on-premise deployments, is usually given that the bucket serves over HTTPs, but with a self-signed certificate. Well, that brings some headaches. Or rather, it brings some headaches as long as you don't warn as a variable for the host, for the instance, that this bucket is with self-signed or invalid certificates. Then, when there are some operations that Omniliads does when moving a recording, moving a backup, bringing some file, etc., you are going to need to be warned that, watch out, does not make an exception at SSL level. Otherwise, well, it's not going to work. Notice that wanted to clearly exemplify what usually happens in on-premise deployments, where we have a bucket and object storage with certificates, self-signed or not valid by a certifying entity. So with this, I enable the exception that this is an insecure certificate. Well, I think with this, we are ready to go. So I have my 3 hosts here declared. Therefore, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say that I have Espinillo, Algarobo, and Tala as 3 instances of Omniliads that are up here declared. Let me go through. Espinja Finite, perfect, and, well, with the particularity that Algarobo is going to have its own, its other, another bucket URL, another endpoint here, because we're going to use as well. We showed this deployment. Unlike these 2 buckets, these 2 Omnilit instances that have their buckets in the cloud, this Omnilit instance that's going to be on premise has its bucket here also. External, of course. Outside Omnilit, let's then go to make sure that we are inside of the deploy tool. I'm going to go to Ansible, and here let's remember that we had the instance folder and inside instances in test, qua. There we have our inventory, which is the one we are using, the one we have been using in the labs. Here's the inventory. Here we make sure that those are the 3 hosts. And now let's go with a deploy. Action. Install. Tenant. Test. Quad. To see what happened. Action install. Now, yes. Well, this is going to fire back. Now, 3 instances in parallel, each with its own external bucket. They already accessed via SSH for now. We'll start running all tasks. Deployment, it is important, well, to convince us of this, to work with the external bucket when it is possible. Because, well, it has many advantages. The issue we've already talked about of scalability, the ability to scale that have that, and low cost of storage in terms of cost per gigabyte. That presents the object storage, the topic of availability, redundancy. These systems are already very simple to make. Redundant copies of the data information. The question of security to access the data, access control, while encryption. The topic of decoupling. All this information that must be persisted and saved. The maintenance issue. Here, the IT department is not involved in the maintenance of the storage because directly this is maintained by the supplier, let's say in case it is a V instance or in an on-premise deployment, will be responsible for maintaining and making copies and replication of the object storage server, but gives us the lightness to walk much lighter of baggage because, well, each one of these instances, from the moment we also see the backups part, is going to have all the unstructured data and the backups of the database related to the Postgres here inside. So this will allow us to directly, that if we have to recreate the instance or even move this instance, migrate it to another cloud provider, or even migrate to an on-premise scenario, it is going to allow me that this can be conceived as something very ephemeral that simply raises a series of containers in a format quite styles and connects to the bucket to restore, in any case, a copy of the database of the instance in which it was made. Last, backup at the database level related to the Postgres, and it's also coupled with all the part of recordings and other data that OmniLeads is throwing in here. Then turns the Linux instance into something quite ephemeral, even very compatible with the immutable infrastructure, let's say the possibility of having immutable coded infrastructure, and that can be instances. that can be easily redeployed, destroyed, or migrated to other geographic locations. Physical cloud providers, because actually in here and in a outsourced way we leave everything that is persistent and needs to be recovered. Of course, we will have to have clear that here we will have to have some replication policy. Well, we will have to see it. The service level that will have the cloud provider, is already an industry standard a long time ago. So, we are not going to get into questioning or philosophizing regarding 2010 to this work of to leave or outsource unstructured storage to an external bucket. Here, the deployment of the 3 instances on which we are going to be working in this laboratory and in a couple of subsequent laboratories is moving forward. Because, it will have to do with this, of backup and restore. And this backup restore especially makes sense when we just throw the backups to an external device outside our Elite instance. Now, we are going to wait that it is carried out.